to Office Hours. We're going to get started here in a minute or two. While you're waiting, go ahead and drop your questions in chat. If you're joined through YouTube or if you're joined through Teams, just use the chat function on whichever platform and drop your questions. We're excited to answer them and get started today. Thanks for joining. We'll see you in a few.
We are a pretty unique group because we have deep technical knowledge and we have a lot of broad business knowledge. And our approach is to try to bring those things together.
There's like the HR talent experience team, and then there's the IT team, and they're always butting heads like this. Prime for siloed people, cliques, and people talking around each other, and there being rumors, so it doesn't feel like a cohesive team a lot of the time.
The team that's focused solely on traditional IT is not positioned well to help with how technology could be more strategically used in the business, right? They care about desktop support and making sure that the network is secure.
Giving them a tool doesn't make someone successful. Being able to use that tool to solve a business problem is what makes them successful.
Where we tend to focus is kind of that layer above, where we try to take all of those technology and those tools that you have as an organization and help you leverage them at that business user level so that you're effectively accomplishing your mission in the most efficient way possible.
Because you want every employee, from a person who's managing an office all the way to somebody out in the field or even executive level, you want all of them to be working together.
How do we optimize them? How do we bring them into a technology world where it can do things for us instead of relying on a manual process?
What I care about is that you have the right tool for the job. And so to that end, we're gonna evaluate that and tell you, no, don't do it with that tool. If you're able to use technology more effectively, the people that are supposed to be focused on the mission of the organization can actually do more missional things because the tech is handling the rest.
Having a successful outcome of the project, there's no question that we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. We set ourselves up as an organization that is our focus, that's our guiding light, and so it pervades everything we do. Bulb Digital helps organizations transform their business using technology.
We help businesses use technology better so that their people work better together.
All right. Alrighty, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining Office Hours. I'm Emma and I'm joined here with Mike.
Hey
This
everybody.
is our December Office Hours here at Bulb Digital. If you're new to this is something we do the first Wednesday of every month, or usually around that first week. And I think Office Hours really just started from a place of, hey, we get some random questions once in a while, and we wish we could share these answers out with a broader audience. We help companies with Microsoft 365 to really streamline their processes and align their people. And there's so many questions around Microsoft 365 and using these tools at your organization. So we started this forum first Wednesday of every month to really answer those. So that's what we're going to do today. I see a few people have already dropped their questions in the chat. You're either joined through Teams or YouTube. We go live on YouTube, or if you register ahead of time, you're able to join our Teams meeting. The kind of plus there, if you register ahead, is that you're able to come off mute and actually talk to us and give us some more context on your questions. So join that way next time if you're on YouTube. But either way, drop your questions in the chat throughout, and we'll just kind of go through all the different questions as we get them. We did have a couple that were submitted before we got started, so we might start with those. Am I missing anything else, Mike, on housekeeping?
Well, I was just going to say, along the same lines of the thing you just said,
Yeah.
a reminder, if you don't get a chance to ask your question here, you can always post to our Office Hours forum, like in between sessions, and we'll pick those questions up in our next Office Hours.
Yeah. Awesome. And yeah, if you're new to Bulb Digital or you're new to our page, we're so glad you're here. We're so glad to connect with you. One question that I usually ask at the beginning as well, if people will humor me and put in the chat, how did you find us? Just post how you found us. Was it YouTube? Was it through our newsletter? We have a weekly newsletter that goes out. Maybe you did a project with us, or you're part of our workplace community. Just drop that in the chat at any point throughout, but let me know how you found us. I'm always curious to see how people connected. Always great to see. All right, so Mike, I'm gonna flip over and start us with one of the questions that was submitted within the last month. All right, here was kind of a straightforward question. This person, Randy, asks, what are the options in Microsoft 365 for creating an employee directory?
Wow, that is a straightforward question.
Yes.
With not a straightforward answer.
Love it.
So this is a pretty common thing that we've run into in a lot of other actual customer scenarios. So the answer for this used to be from Microsoft, use Delve, right? You can find all of your employees there, and there's a bit of an org structure there created, and you can find out who works with who and what they've been working on together and things like that. That's not always the best answer. It's actually something that Microsoft is moving away from at some level, and it doesn't always foot the bill in terms of an actual employee directory. So what we have done as a remedy for that is we have created a variety of different ways. We've done it primarily inside of SharePoint, but you can create all kinds of... Is that noise getting picked up, I wonder?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
Is there? Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
Cool. No worries. I thought somebody was drilling something in the
Be
basement.
my phone.
No worries. So that said, we've typically built these things inside of a container like SharePoint, so a SharePoint site collection where you can build an employee directory or a department directory. And you can, within SharePoint, you can create things called content types, and so you can define a contact record, if you will, and you can put all of the fields that you want to on it. One of the fields that you can add to that is an actual, it's an email address or an actual employee, a people field. And so you can connect directly to that person that's in your organization. So I'm assuming all of these things are inside of your organization to start with. And then you can add all kinds of other metadata to that content type or to that list. And then you can serve things up out of that list. So one of the ways that we've made that a nice employee directory experience is to add on top of that a component called PNP search web parts, modern search web parts. So it gives you the ability to define what the result looks like. So the data cards that include the employee information, as well as the ability to connect a search box, as well as various slicers or verticals or ways to see that data. So if you have it split up by department and you have that metadata in that list, you can allow users to find it that way. And on each of those cards, you can include their contact information, their title, the department that they work in, phone number, email address that can also be hot, so somebody can click on it, or a link to chat with them in Teams. Like, there's all kinds of things that you can add to those data cards. And then because it's in SharePoint, it can essentially be surfaced relatively easily within Teams, if that's where you wanted it to be, or just on your corporate intranet.
Yeah.
And then in addition to your internal employee resources, you can augment or add to that contact list in SharePoint because it's just a list. So if you have external contacts or partners that you're working with or outside vendors, other people that people need to reach out to on a regular basis, you could include them in that directory as well. But that's typically how we've dealt with it. There is no out-of-the-box, one-size-fits-all. It does everything for everybody. One of the challenges that's like, just so everybody understands, we all have profile information within Active Directory as part of our employee profile. Sometimes organizations limit or restrict what you're able to modify there. So sometimes they're like, no, you can't put a silly picture of yourself or an avatar as your profile picture. You have to have your corporate, suit and tie photo, for example, so they control that. More often than that, they refuse to allow you to customize by adding custom fields to people's profiles. So oftentimes organizations will have special things about their organization, how they categorize their people, and Active Directory is extensible, but IT management typically will restrict that extensibility and won't let you do it, which is why SharePoint becomes a good option, because anybody who can work their way through SharePoint can come up with a good solution for that problem.
Thank you for that straightforward answer to the very.
I told you it wasn't straightforward, right?
No, I love it. No, I think that was really comprehensive, and I think we'll switch over to Laura's questions here, and then we can jump back to some of these previously registered questions. But the one other point I wanted to make about the employee directory that I think is kind of neat that we've done here at Bulb Digital within our intranet space is pulling information from the employee directory, or actually, I don't know how we do it on the back end because I didn't set it up, but we have a page on our intranet that shares everyone's birthday and everyone's anniversary date with the company. And as someone that was new to the company 2.5 years, almost over 2 years ago now, it was neat coming in to be able to see how long everyone else had been with the company, and also just fun to see when their birthdays were. So it's stuff like that that you can do once you get everyone's information.
Yeah, so that's a key thing. Organizations often have a problem because on their intranets, they're like, I want to show people with upcoming birthdays, right? And that's where that PNP search results web part comes in, is because you can then apply a filter that says, find me employees who have a birthday in the next, N months or whatever that might be, or 90 days. And then they can show up in that upcoming birthdays, widget.
Yeah, so it's all connected, and I think it's a great challenge kind of ahead of you, Randy, and I hope that you can kind of figure out how to get all the employees in there and then use it in some of those creative ways, because I think it builds a lot of connections. All right, we're going to switch over to Laura. Posted a couple questions here.
These are good ones.
I love it. Okay. I'm using the Power Platform pipeline to manage flows. We have 3 environments, dev, test, prod. Awesome. How can I redeploy a previous version of a solution to dev? It seems like I can only redeploy to a target environment.
Yeah, so this is a good question. So you're using managed pipelines to deploy from dev, test, prod. It's a best practice. I love that you're doing that. I love the ALM. We like that kind of thing. That's the right way to do it. However, it sounds like you got yourself in a predicament where you're like, oh man, somebody made a change in dev and I wish I could go back to a previous version of that thing in dev. So there's a couple things that you could do. One is you can't use the managed pipelines to get back to where you were. That just won't work. If you thought ahead, and so now, like, hindsight is 20/20, now that you've run into this problem, one of the things that you could do to help yourself in the future, if you think this is going to continue to be a problem, is when you produce that export to, let's say, test from dev. So you've completed a piece of work, you're ready for it to go to the next phase. You should, at the same time, if you're not already doing it, produce an unmanaged export of the solution that you're sending to test. And what that will do is that will give you, every time you do that, that will give you an unmanaged version of the solution that you could at any time pick up and say, oh, that's the one I want because that had my good code in it. And you could deploy that unmanaged version to your dev environment. If there's something you can't do, it's you cannot deploy a managed version to your dev environment, because then you can no longer modify any of the components in the solution. So you always have to deploy an unmanaged version if you're going to deploy over the top of anything in dev. So that means you just need to be creating that copy that's unmanaged and have it to go back to. So that's one thing you can do. Chances are you haven't done that. So then your other alternative is, if you're inside of a window, I think it's 7 days. I'd have to check to be sure. But if you're inside of 7 days of when this when the last good code you had existed, you can go back in as into the Power Platform admin settings to that environment, and you can restore that environment. And by default, they're stored in, I believe, 15-minute increments. And so if you can go back to the point in time at which you know the solution was the way that you wanted it, you could restore that entire environment to the state that it was in at that time. And so that would be probably the immediate course of action that you should take now if you have, if that code still exists in the last 7 days. So all of those backups are automatic in Power Platform environments. You can customize how the environments are backed up and how long you keep them for. Obviously, it stores more data, but that by default, I think you get 7 days in 15-minute increments.
Sweet. Laura, we did, I see you just came off mute. Awesome. Go ahead and give us more context.
Hi, thank you so much. So when I deploy a solution, I don't know if I have an option to choose whether it's unmanaged or not.
Right.
I know that we created our test and production environments to be managed. So I don't know if I also have the option to do unmanaged.
So in the context of this conversation, managed means two different things. One thing that it means is you're using what are called managed environments, and managed environments support what are called managed pipelines. And all managed pipelines is a Power Platform way. So you typically will have another environment kind of hanging off to the side that we'll refer to as the ALM environment. And that environment will manage the deployment from dev to test to prod, okay? And you cannot do managed pipelines without managed environments. Like those two things go together. So that's the alternative to, well, I have Azure DevOps and I'm going to go create pipelines in Azure DevOps to do my deployment, okay? So that's another way to do it. It's a bit more advanced. You got to have some other stuff going on. Managed pipelines is the way to go if you're in a fairly simple scenario, 100% of the time. That is different than a managed versus an unmanaged solution. So managed solutions and unmanaged solutions existed long before managed environments and managed pipelines. So in any Power Platform environment, when you create a solution and you export it, you have a choice when you export. So if you manually export it, you'll see this choice. You can say, I want to export a managed version or an unmanaged version. The managed version will produce a copy of that solution that you can take to any other environment, which is then safe from any edit or modification from users in that environment. That's the intent, is right. It's fairly locked down. Now, technically, I'll tell you, if you're a sysadmin, you can do some things in that environment to change those components, but they're actually layers on top of your managed solution. They're not actually editing the things in your solution. If, however, you choose the unmanaged solution export, you will create a copy of the solution whereby if you deploy that to any environment, all of the components in the solution will be editable by makers or users who have that capability in that environment. And so at the time that you produce that managed, because chances are the default is you're producing a managed solution export with the managed pipeline because that's the recommended approach. At the time that you do that, like right now, it would be like, oh, I'm going to manually go create an unmanaged export of that same solution. So I have a copy of it. And you save that off somewhere. And then you could, in theory, go back to whatever version of that export you had, as long as you've been collecting those throughout time. So it might be something like, well, after we do, let's say your dev cycles are every 2 weeks, after 8 weeks, it's pretty safe. I can start getting rid of the old ones, right? And so you keep one a week or one every 2 weeks and maybe up to 4 of those, and then you start deleting the older ones. But you have to have an unmanaged version in order to deploy back to your dev environment.
Got it. Okay, so basically before I deploy the solution using the pipeline, I should export the solution as unmanaged, save it off somewhere, and then deploy it.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I don't know off the top of my head, I don't know if managed pipelines have the capability for you to configure like an additional pipeline flow, if you will, to produce an unmanaged. I think you can probably configure it to export an unmanaged instead of managed. But if you're deploying to test, you want to deploy a managed version always because you don't want anybody monkeying with things and creating bugs that you didn't create in the first place. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Love the question.
Yeah, let's actually just go, Laura, to your second question here too. We can just work through this one too. I'm going to read it out. I have questions about solution best practices. I have a single business process that uses 10 different flows. Should I create one solution for all of those flows or separate solutions for each flow? Should I create a separate solution that just contains common connection references and nothing else? I feel like I shouldn't have a list of repeated connection references when building out a flow.
Yeah, this is another good question. I like it. We wrestle with this in real life all the time. So in your scenario, it sounds fairly simple. I would probably package up everything in a single solution, especially if you have flows that call other flows. The best practice is, those are child flows, and you want those things to be in the same solution. There's actually documentation out there that says they need to be in the same solution. However, I can tell you from experience that I have been able to call child flows from cross solutions, provided that all of the flows are at least in a solution. So I know you can do that. When you separate the things into different solutions, you're actually creating dependencies on solutions. So if you have all of your child flows, for example, in one solution and a parent flow that calls all of those flows, or your business process flow in another solution, the solution that has the business process flow is now dependent on the solution that has all of the child flows. And so that means you have to deploy the solution with the child flows first and the solution with the business process flow second. If you add another child flow and use it with the business process flow, you have to make sure that you deploy those things in the right order. Otherwise, it will say, hey, I don't see that thing out here, I'm not going to deploy. Or it will, in the case of flow dependencies, it will turn the flow off. So if it's a production environment and something's missing and you deploy the solution with the parent flow in it, it'll actually go, oh, I can't find that child flow, I'm going to just turn myself off. And then that can be a real problem in production. So you need to pay attention to those types of things. When your solution gets rather large, it's a good idea to split things up into different solutions with different dependencies. Often we'll think of things in terms of, like, what are my most foundational layers? Connection references, which is one of the things that you called out here, is a fairly foundational thing. You want to have all of those connection references in place. And you could conceivably put that in its own solution and add connection references to it going forward. But remember, new connection references used by other things or referenced by other things have to be then deployed first. So you just have to make sure you get those things done in that order. Other things that we kind of look at as foundational and we might put in a separate solution would be all of my table structure, for example. That's often a way that we'll structure it. And then you might have flows or something like that separately in another solution as well.
Okay, got it. So even if I make a change to one flow, I'm still going to be deploying all of those flows.
Yes, that's correct. So if whatever's in the solution with that flow, everything goes with it. So if you have, this is another way people split things up. Once you get to that higher level, so we're not talking foundational anymore. And when you get to the higher level and you're talking about things like app features, for example, or even different apps. So you might have a Canvas app and a model-driven app all using the same Dataverse data. You could separate those things into different solutions, which would allow you to deploy your Canvas app separately from the model-driven app. Because let's say the people who are using the Canvas app on their mobile device have an urgent need for a bug to get fixed, but you have a bunch of stuff in limbo in the model-driven app that you're not ready to deploy yet. And so you want to export just that Canvas app. Now, you can make a game time decision and say, well, I've got a bug I need to fix. It's urgent on the Canvas app side. And you can create a new solution, put the Canvas app in it, and just deploy that and call it like a hotfix solution. And that Canvas app can also be in your main solution and then deployed with the regular release cycle over top. That's a way to manage it as well. When you have those urgent type scenarios, you just kind of have to start keeping track of that. One of the challenges in that scenario is, well, if you're trying to do things right with managed pipelines, it's not always the easiest thing to say on a whim, I need a urgent hotfix solution out here that I'm now going to deploy. Like how are you going to deploy that, right? Then you have to configure managed pipelines to push it out and all of that kind of stuff too. So you just have to weigh all of those things. It's kind of, is the juice worth the squeeze kind of a question. But yeah.
Okay, good to know. And then for the connection references, I mean, does it even make sense to create this one solution just for connection references as an easier way to manage them? Because I would imagine I'm going to be, using those throughout a bunch of different solutions. So why add the same connection reference to all of those different solutions?
Yes, that would be something. It would be, it's more, I would call it more organized to put them in their own solution. The thing you have to be a little bit careful of is you can do that to the nth degree, and then you end up with 25 solutions. And it may not be necessary. Things like connection references and tables or entities are the things that I would separate out. Because you could go component by component, and as you are probably well aware, inside of a Power Platform environment, there's like hundreds of different types of components, and you could say, well, we're going to separate them all, and I'm going to sort these things by dependency and deploy them that way. Usually, it's not worth it.
Okay.
The other thing to consider too, is which maybe you said you have dev test prod. These scenarios get even more complicated if you are using shared environments. So if you have a single production environment that is supporting, let's say, multiple business purposes with different apps, but they're all sharing the same Dataverse database, you can then create additional conflicts across solutions because you have things competing for the same task table and stuff like that.
We have a coworker of ours, I think, tuned in. This is a shout out from Michaela. She mentioned that managed pipelines are per environment, not per solution. You just have to navigate to a different solution to use the same pipeline for it. You don't necessarily need to create a new pipeline for each solution.
There's that answer that I didn't know.
There you go.
Awesome.
Thanks, Michaela.
Thank you.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Laura. Love it. If you have other questions, drop them in the chat. Yeah, so I just want to take a second to reset the room. If you're on YouTube, drop in the chat what your questions are, what you're working on. We're curious to hear about people's plans for 2025, any new initiatives that you're kind of trying to wrap up before the end of the year, or start in the new year. We had one comment here. I think this was a comment about your employee directory that said if you have a beard like that in your profile, you must have at least 3 IT certifications. And that's true. I bet you do have a lot of certifications.
Actually, it's not true.
Or do you have none?
I had one certification years ago. I dropped it. I don't care that much about certifications.
There you go.
I'm a jiggle the handle kind of guy.
How's that for the stereotype? Love it. So we've got another question that was already submitted, so we'll go back to that one. But like I said, put some more questions in there. Oh, that's the Ron Swanson answer. That is so true. Mike is our resident Ron Swanson. I'm a big, Parks and Rec fan. Yeah, that is accurate. You're getting to know us.
It's so great that the vibe just comes through.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, so this person, they posted, 2 weeks ago, they sent us this question. How can we take a reply to a Teams post and populate the contents of that message into a Microsoft list? I know how to create a Microsoft list entry from a post, but how do we capture the data and intel on the replies? Then feed that back into the list on the row that correlates to the initial post. Okay, so it's just that layer of complexity.
Yeah.
The last thing that they said here was basically we have seen really powerful collaboration in the Teams post. How do we capture that magic and turn it into structured data that we can use? Thoughts?
Yeah, I got some thoughts here. So I'll lead with something like, this is a great one to have Matt Dressel's wisdom on.
Matt Dressel, if you're listening.
I'm sure he would have something to say here. My gut... the first question I would ask is like, why do you want to do this? And that's because it sounds like in this scenario that you're talking about, it's like, well, we have this channel where we get a lot of good conversations, and I want to capture all of those conversations and anything else that comes from those conversations in a list item and related list items. And to me, it sounds a lot like data bloat. So like, what are you going to do with that data would be one of the questions I would ask. If I were to want to do something like this, I might presume or make an assumption that, well, we ought to have a little bit more structure about the responses to these questions or these conversations that are happening. And I might come up with a strategy that allowed us to capture information from the use of an adaptive card that allows user response. They can reply to an adaptive card that has a question with like text and say, oh, well, I think this and that and the other. And then you can listen inside of Power Automate in a flow to any responses to that adaptive card in that channel, and then do something structured with it, which is much more ability to structure that as opposed to just capture the whole of the conversation. Other similar questions we've had to this in the past have revolved around things like, well, I want to archive the conversations. I want to save these things off, and what does that really look like? And I don't know if that's born out of a fear of like losing the information one day and not having it as a reference, or what that actually is. But if that's the case, then it would be like, well, let's talk about retention policies and how you manage that. And so that's kind of how I would approach that. I would be a little bit cautious about just having flows that are constantly running, feeding a SharePoint list with a bunch of conversation content, because very quickly you're going to get a list with well over 5,000 items in it, which then becomes more unwieldy and difficult to use anyways. So,
yeah. So asking the why behind that, and why that's all set up the way it is initially, and just kind of considering,
I think there are definitely some probably better approaches if we understood the why behind that.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not positive if they are on this call or not. Cool. So I think that brings us to any questions that have been submitted. We have a couple topics that we'd love to talk about and share that are just new in the Microsoft world, that are kind of, I don't know, making waves, I guess I would say. So we'll probably, that are kind of trendy. We'll probably just chat about that. But if you're, again, joined from YouTube, go ahead and put questions that you have for us about Microsoft 365 in the chat. And if you're listening and you're like, man, this is all way too overwhelming, I wish we could just work with a team or be able to ask these questions all the time, 24/7. There are different ways you can work with us. We do projects with organizations. You can check out all that information on our website, or you just schedule a call with one of us and talk to us about what you're trying to do. We'll do a free consultation call. Or we have our digital workplace community, our digital community called The Workplace. And that's kind of like we're on digital speed dial, which is sort of fun because we have other like-minded individuals in that community. And people ask questions all the time, troubleshoot different things. We ask questions to each other, and you kind of get to be in on that community there.
And just a reminder that the questions both there and here don't have to just be technical.
Very true.
We like the strategy questions too. So if you're wondering, how do I get my team on board in, using Teams all the way? Like that's the type of thing we like to answer as well. Okay,
so Mike doesn't know I'm going to do this, but I'm going to ask you a question that I've been pondering since we had a call this morning with a client on the big change that is coming to Teams that some people are quipping as the biggest change to come to Teams since like 2017, which is pretty crazy because that's a lot of years. But if you haven't kind of been in the world of Microsoft 365, I'll share that they're changing the chats and channels and Teams view and how all of those work together. Really, it's just the view. I'm still working through how to share all of this, but I was at a user group meeting yesterday and someone asked the question, how would you go about training, explaining, helping a team, an organization know that this change is coming, or if this change has already come, how would you go about training people on why the change matters? What would you do? So I'm going to pose that as an open question, Mike. What would you tell a client? And we'll work through it because I've got some thoughts on it too, but it is a big change, and I think we're trying to think through how you should communicate that to your team as well.
Yeah, this is one of those things that it's materially, the data is not going to be in any different location or anything like that. It's truly how it's represented to the user, and the reason that it has changed is primarily to promote the use of channels over chats to get people communicating in a more effective and useful long-term way within Teams. And so that's one of the reasons we like the change a lot. We think it's been a long time coming. It's one of the things that has caused us to look at Teams and go, well, I kind of still want to use Slack. And so we still use Slack. So we use both. But in terms of training your end users, this is one of those things that's like, well, a quick video that somebody could watch, like 90 seconds. You could be like, hey, your cheese is going to move.
Yeah, you're not going to see this little Teams icon anymore. You'll I hate the word Teams is used for too many things. You'll still see the Teams icon, the purple one, in the bottom of your screen, but you won't see the word Teams on your left bar anymore within Microsoft.
So like that type, like we do obviously our own video content to try to help people overcome these types of issues, but we're also involved in other organizations where they build, job aids, they call them, or little quick videos on, hey, this change is coming, here's how you do it. And for the people who are engaged and willing to go look at those things, and obviously you can post a notification in Teams and say, hey, go check out this video, this is going to change. That would be a fairly easy approach. This is not an enterprise systems change, right? It's not that type of a thing.
Which is kind of the positive side of it, because it doesn't mean that that much is, you don't actually have to alter your behavior all that much. It's more just understanding where, like I love that your cheese is moving. It's more just understanding where you need to click to still find the same information.
And I would tell you that probably 60 to 70% of the users are just going to figure it out. They're going to oh, I see it moved, because they're used.
Where did it go? I got to ask the question.
If they're used to using Microsoft 365 tools, stuff changes every week, right? It's like, oh, I got to. And it's a little bit frustrating, or it can be. But once you figure it out, like, so people are used to that, and so then the hope is that the other portion of the users that aren't paying attention or don't navigate that type of change well, give them a little 90-second video, and hopefully it helps out.
I love that advice. I think that's great. The client that we were talking about this change with this morning, a couple of comments that they had made is, they love the fact that you're going to be able to customize and create sections so that you could have all of your teams together, all of your specific channels that you work on within a team, and then you can kind of leave the other channels but pull certain channels up to a section. So that customization, I think, has been asked for a long time from those using tools like Slack, which has a lot of customization available. So that's a huge plus. I'll start with the positive. The negative that we talked about, which at this particular organization and many others we've worked with, they have an issue getting people to pull away from chats and actually have the conversations in channels. And unfortunately, this change, this creating the one bucket that's going to hold everything, makes it almost easier to just stay in chat, because you can have your files in the team in the correct spot they're supposed to be, but then you're having the conversations about those files in a chat, and maybe you've sectioned and grouped it all together. That's not what we want to be doing. That's there for so many reasons. And again, I got to give credit to this client. Their team was the one calling out the reasons they don't want to do that, because if you have someone in that chat who leaves the company and then you replace them, you can't add that person to that chat and see the history. So there's so many reasons. We could get into all of them,
but that is the reason that you figure out how to manage your team's knowledge base effectively as a separate thing, right?
Yeah, and you have to kind of change the culture to have conversations in channels. So anyway, not to get too in the weeds with all of that, but it's a hot topic, I think, around here, and a lot of people are talking about it in the Microsoft community. We're overall positive, overall happy about the change, but we're kind of working on some content on how to communicate this with your team and how to make sure you're using the change in the best way possible and not just all of a sudden chatting with everyone.
So I have two more things.
Okay,
One is, well, it's going to change again, so
that's
whatever.
True.
The second thing is, if you heard what I just said and said, oh, I can't make videos, our organization doesn't do that kind of thing, we're not good at that. Baloney. You have Stream now. You have Teams. You can record your screen. All kinds of things you can do, and you can post it. It's like all there in that M365 sandbox. Get to work.
Yeah, try it. I like watching the tutorial if I'm trying to figure something out. And so if that's how you learn, just try to put one together for your team. I think that's really great advice. And I know I'd rather watch that and kind of learn than having to read a really long with a bunch of screenshots.
Oh, yeah.
Information.
Video's the way to go, and it's much more easy to produce today.
Yeah. Cool. Great encouragements. Sweet. I don't think we have any other big questions coming through. If you have questions, post them in the chat, and we'll get to those. We have about 20 minutes left. Unless you have other topics, Mike, we can always just kind of hang out and put on some music. Or do you have other topics you want to dive into?
I don't know. See, I didn't come prepared with any, because
I know
people have always asked enough questions. Come on, people.
I mean, I've got other topics, but we don't have to.
But you want to give me opportunity?
We don't have to dive into them.
I don't know if you want to.
I'm trying to think. So yesterday I went to this Microsoft user group meeting. I'm trying to think of other. Oh, here's another one. If you haven't noticed, the general channel has had a lot of conversation around it. General channel is the name that Microsoft has historically given the first channel created within any team that you create. And the word general, I don't know where they came up with that, but
it's general.
It's just, it's general. It's like, this is where everything that's general for this team goes. But there's some special privileges that kind of come with that channel, or at least historically there have been. Well, a lot of people asked, I want to be able to rename that channel. And for probably other reasons as well, Microsoft has now created the ability that you can change the name on the first channel created in a team. The catch is that you can't name it general if you're creating the team, just from like a regular Teams environment. if you have an automation set up or a template set up, you're still able to use the word general, which adds a whole nother layer of complexity because some people can still use it and some people can't.
Shout out to all my traditional developers out there.
Yeah.
How do you feel now that general has been declared a reserved term?
Yeah, I think some people have very strong opinions about it. So anyway, if you're starting to create some new teams in Teams and you're noticing this is weird, you know, I'm not able to use the word general. I used to be able to always use that. That's the change that happened. That's, I think, should be pretty much accessible by everyone. The word I've been using instead of general is just the word all because it kind of encapsulates that. I would be curious if other people have words that they're trending towards.
That's the money answer. Because that's the question that people are going to ask is like, oh, well.
What should I use?
Yeah, what do you use, right?
Yeah.
And,
the other thing, though, with this big change of putting chats and channels all into one bucket is when you have all your channels pulled out and maybe in its own section, all you will see is general, 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 like historically, or all. And you'll have like the little icon that kind of tells you where it's from, what team it's from, but you know, not all of us can read those all the time. And it would be helpful, and this is what I think I'm going to be doing going forward, writing something like the acronyms for the team that it's a part of, or something that will denote if you're part of a lot of Microsoft Teams and you're part of a lot of general or all channels, something that will kind of tell you the difference between those channels, because it's not going to always be nested within that team in this new view. So you got to start thinking through kind of ways to get creative to just help yourself differentiate as you're looking at everything between the different channels. That's just another thing that came up yesterday when we were chatting through all that.
I just thought of something to say.
Oh.
Yeah. Shout out to you. Your video, your
thanks.
latest video has been out a week on YouTube, 51,000 views.
Yeah, it's exciting. We put together a video really all about project management and using Teams for project management. We'd done one about 2.5 years ago, and it's got a lot of likes and views, and it just seems like it's a topic that resonates with a lot of people. So if you're trying to use Teams to manage projects, or you know, we say project management, but it's really work management. We're trying to get work done, and we're trying to use Teams. How do we do those two things together? I did just create a video. It's a little long. It's 24 minutes, but if you hang with it, I promise you'll hopefully learn something. So yeah, go check that out. Like I said, it's resonating with a lot of people, so it's cool to see people using these tools.
If you like the beard, watch my videos.
Yeah, there you go. Mike's got some great stuff on Power Apps out there too. Cool. Oh, sweet. Someone says, I sent that to my wife. She just started a nonprofit, and they are starting to build out their systems.
Nice.
That's sweet. Yeah, I guess follow-up question for those watching. We're trying to come up with our next video topic. What else would you guys like to see? What would be helpful? What type of content that could maybe build on that would be helpful? Drop us a line or... Yeah. Oh, thanks. You guys put out great content.
Yeah,
Thank you.
What are the things that you wish the Microsoft tools would do that they don't?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sort of kind of leaning into the task management side of things. I think a lot of questions have come up on that. We also did a video on that a few years ago, but everything changes so quickly. I mean, already my Teams video that we literally just dropped last week, we recorded it, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. It's already out of date because it doesn't have the new chats and channels experience in the screenshots. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. Chase the dragon, some people say.
Yeah, it's true. You got to chase that dragon. Awesome.
Mitch, how many points do I get for phrase references that I drop in this office hours today?
No comment. Okay, this is good. I'm glad someone else is responding on this. In your project management video, you mentioned processes and operations as opposed to projects, but that may be more of a business-specific decision. This is so true, this processes versus projects. And I mean, even just talking to colleagues of ours and clients as well, everyone has things they have to do every single week or every single month or every single quarter. There's so much that's cyclical in the business world. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. And the tools themselves, I don't always feel like they lend themselves well to they're they're more built on like a unique project basis unless you tweak a few things. So we should probably dive into that.
Yeah,
topic.
I mean, the nature of the process, or the nature of process, is that it is cyclical and repeating, and ultimately it's about recurring tasks, things that you do again and again, or once a year, or once a quarter. And how do you manage that? Do you go in and create a task every quarter for the next quarter's task? That's kind of painful. If you have those types of things, one of the questions you can ask is, should we automate this? Right? What segments of it can the computer do?
Yeah.
So,
and it's a question I'm asking myself, because even as a project manager, I do a lot of startup tasks on projects that are very repeatable. And I've started to use Loop. I've started to use Planner in those processes. And those have been really helpful. I mean, it has taken, I used to set up a project, it'd take me a couple hours depending on the complexity and getting different team members involved and getting all the tools to work together. I have it down where I can do it so much faster now. And even if I could teach people that.
So would you describe the process of project startup as using the tool, like the tool shortcuts effectively? Like for Loop, for example?
Yes.
Right, like knowing what those shortcuts are so that you're not typing everything out or creating the entire task list.
And it's not even the template, it's not even using templates necessarily, but it's almost being creative in how you template the process out to repeat the process. I don't know. I don't know if my process is perfect, but I've said process too many times. No, this has been good. I hope that what we shared today kind of helps give you some heads up on what's coming or what has already changed within teams. I don't think we have any other questions submitted, so we're probably just going to wrap up early. This is the classic between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Not a lot gets done, but that's all right. We really appreciate everyone joining.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, that's true. Cool. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks so much. Like I said, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us in all those places, and we're here to help. So reach out if we can help you. Thanks so much.
See you next time.